I'm Joel Sharpton, one half of the Articulate Coven. I've been a lifelong Anne Rice fan, and while I've read and enjoyed a ton of other vampire fiction, I haven't built an entire fandom around them like I did for Anne. So why not? Well, I've been exploring it, reading some of those vampire novels that I loved so much around the same time that I discovered Anne Rice, and finding out what I like about them, what didn't hit for me, and what makes them different than Anne's works. Today, we're talking about Anne Rice versus Salem's Lot. The most brilliant thing about this novel isn't the vampires. It's the chapter right in the middle of the thing where all the secrets of this tiny, uneventful town are laid bare for the reader. And the true evil is understood to have been there all along. Nobody does that sort of thing as well as King does it. Genuinely. If he had decided to write happy and tragic little dramas about American life, we'd talk about him like he was the next Steinbeck. And I think he'd still have sold a boatload of books. The townspeople are why you show up for Stephen King. And the townspeople in Salem Lot are some of the most interesting and the most terrible that he's ever written. I'll just point out here that he had an entire TV series written not as an adaptation of any one particular book, but of a town that he wrote a bunch of books about. Salem's Lot, though, is not set in Castle Rock. Salem's Lot is a 1975 supernatural novel by Stephen King and was his second novel published. The story involves writer Ben Mears returning to Salem's Lot, short for Jerusalem's Lot, a town in Maine that Ben spent time in as a child, only to discover that the town's residents are turning into vampires. Salem's Lot is revisited in the short stories Jerusalem's Lot and One for the Road, both of which appear in the short story collection Night Shift from 1978. One way you know Salem's Lot is a great story is that people keep trying to retell it. It's been adapted in 1979 into a two-part miniseries for television directed by Tobe Hooper of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame, and a 2004 television miniseries directed by Michael Salomon. A brand new feature film adaptation has just been released on Max. Salem's Lot is just down the road a bit from Castle Rock and not that far from Derry, but it's got plenty of its own ghosts and demons, except they are almost all of the human variety. I love how skeptical almost every member of the town is that a vampire infestation is taking over, even once they've been presented with a pile of evidence. The greatest example of this is the sheriff, who, even once he knows it all to be true, wishes our heroes best of luck and splits town entirely. One of the questions in the modern TV series Interview with the Vampire from AMC is how can vampires stay a secret in a modern world full of technology and surveillance? The answer is so mundane that it's disappointing, but it's true. Most people just wouldn't believe their own eyes. That's absolutely true here in Salem's Lot. Anne brilliantly uses the Talamasca files in her Witching Hour novel, and here in Salem's Lot we get news clippings and official reports that ground this fantastical story, but also show that the world spins on, no matter what tragedies our characters are enduring. I don't have much negative to say about this novel at all. I'm fairly certain that the vampire lore from this novel continues in Stephen King's Dark Tower series, although I haven't read the books in question, so I can't say specifically how that turns out. I should mention here that there is a fairly recent TV miniseries called Chapelwaite, which apparently is a prequel to this story. Stephen King also does vampires exceedingly well through the graphic novel and comic book series American Vampire. I love how he's expanded and added on to the Dracula vampiric lore in this novel, which is really what most authors do. They're either improvising on or building an opposition to, as Anne Rice's work tends to be. Both have value and are capable of fascinating and satisfying stories. I do want to acknowledge the level of artistry at work here. It's my opinion that Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles rises above genre fiction, and so does Stephen King, at least in this work. This is just great literature. I have thoroughly enjoyed my recent trips back into Brian Lumley's Necroscope series and Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake, but those are just good stories. This is a great novel. I cannot wait to watch Max's new film adaptation of this story. Stephen King's already given it a rave review, and if you'd like to see our coverage of that film, subscribe to this channel or join our Patreon to get all of our videos early and ad-free. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back in a few weeks with Anne Rice versus the Count himself, Dracula.